All right. Uh, Oklahoma State, this is Carly Fay. She was willing to join me for a brief interview about management and leadership. I met Carly in the beginning of 1988 when I was born because she is my older sister. And we've kept in pretty good contact ever since. So, yeah, Carly is the CFO of a business unit at Raytheon. Did I give you the correct title?
Yep, I'm the CFO of the Communications and Airspace Management product line at Raytheon Technologies.
Perfect. And you've been at Raytheon for how long now?
15 years.
And you started in the rotation program over there, correct?
Yep. So I started in their financial leadership development program in 2006. It's a 2-year program where you rotate around different areas within finance at the company. And that's where I started.
Cool. So we've talked in our class a little bit about rotation programs as a way to assess talent. What do you think the advantages and any disadvantages, if there are any, of a rotational program? Did you like that experience?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages that I started to see pretty much right away is the network you're able to build through it. So as a new employee to a company, you get to try different things and get experiences in different parts of finance, but then also you meet people in each one of the rotations. So there were 4 6-month rotations that I did within 2 years. And so I was able to see different parts of the business, different product lines and business units, and meet people along the way. And so a lot of those people became mentors of mine and, friends. And I was able to continue and build those relationships over the years. And so I've really, really felt like it was a great place to start. It's not to say you can't get a similar experience on your own, but it was a great beginning. I do feel at the end, I was ready to be really good at one job instead of doing 4 quick jobs. Because just as soon as you feel like you know what you're doing, you're on to something new. But I think it also helped build that sense of feeling uncomfortable, getting used to coming up with the learning curve in a new role, meeting new people, jumping into a new team and trying to be successful quickly. And so I do feel like I've leveraged that as well, even though it was uncomfortable and it was sometimes tiring.
So that was one of the things I wanted to learn about from you is you've been, over your career is kind of a time period where business and society in general started to look at what is it like for people who don't fit the status quo to fit in. And, you being a young woman and now a young working mother, but excelling in your career through Raytheon. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience and, how that impacted you, or just share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think first of all, it coming along in the ranks, it really didn't get to be an obvious thing for me for a while. So there's a lot of women in finance at Raytheon. There aren't a lot of women at the company. I would say percentage wise, it's not 50-50 across the whole company. It's more of an engineering company, but within finance, it's about 50% women. That being said, as you move up in the ranks, it is not 50% as you move up. And so those percentages decrease pretty significantly. So it wasn't until later in my career where I started noticing or being the only woman in a meeting or the only woman on a proposal or the only female at my grade level in a certain part of the company. But ultimately, there's a lot of gender biases and things like that. They show up a little bit more in side conversations than they do necessarily in your actual work performance. One thing that I try to do, which I've learned over time, honestly, is I'm just very upfront and honest about what I want and what I don't want. And so I've said out loud to my managers what I think my aspirations are, what I think I can be when I grow up, what I think my upside potential is. And then I've also said several times through my career, I will tell you when I don't want a promotion or when I'm not ready for something. Don't expect or don't make an assumption about me based on my age or the fact that I'm a young mom or I'm pregnant or I might get pregnant or anything, just don't make that assumption about me. And sometimes when you just say that out loud, it's a little uncomfortable, but it just cuts that out of the equation. Where someone might come into a situation with some type of bias, like, okay, you're newly married, she's probably going to have a baby. Do I really want to put her in this job?
Yeah.
Maybe she'd rather stay in the job she's in. And so, just by saying out loud, like, don't make that assumption about me, then you cut that out. And they
Right.
don't.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That's a really cool approach. So how many years have you been in a role where you have actual direct reports?
So my first supervisor role, I got in about, I'd probably say 2013, maybe 20. And I supervised like one person. I actually was the manager of an FLDP. So somebody who was in that financial leadership development program. And so that was a good first assignment. It was similar to managing an intern. And so I started off pretty slow, got maybe 2 people. And then in my next role, it got a little bit bigger. So I had about 8 to 10 people in my second manager assignment after that.
And how many people report to you now?
So right now it's about 130 finance employees directly report to me at this point. So I've managed, it kind of grew over time in more of in a way that sort of made sense. My last role had about 40. Once you get above, what I would say is once you get to the point where you're managing managers of other people, you see the scale of what you're doing and how you need to adapt. It's not now just you and that person. It's an organization of people. And so the bigger it gets, you apply a lot of the same, at least I did, you apply a lot of the same approaches, as it scales up. It changes a little bit, but once you get to manager or managers, it changes the game a little bit.
Yeah. So what was the transition like from having a job where your core competency is your ability to understand financial data and interpret it, or whatever the X's and O's of being in the FLDP, to now you have to be a people person? I've obviously known you, so I know that you have both strengths, which is obviously a rarity. But what was it like to transition that? And then to go with that, I'm curious if you're a management business book person who has a strategy about people, or have you just kind of learned how to adapt and move on your own? Like, is that something you put a ton of thought into, or you just focus on results and you'll learn as you go?
So I do put a lot of thought into it. I don't read a lot of management books outside of my education. I did get my MBA right around the time where I was a first-time manager. So I finished my program right around the time where I was a first-time manager. So it was a pretty good time for me to sort of have that, education insertion. And then I've taken some leadership courses along the way. So I was in this, a program called Women Unlimited, where it's an aspiring leadership program for women. I've taken a couple other leadership programs throughout the course of my career. And you learn tips and tricks about how to approach people, but it's more about learning about yourself, how you approach a problem, how you approach a difficult situation or a difficult conversation. But it is a hard transition. I can't really minimize that. It can be a frustrating experience, but it's really rewarding. It's one of the most rewarding parts about being in my job. And what's interesting is I manage people along the bell curve of performance. So the highest performing people at the company and people who have been on performance plans that have ultimately exited the company, and everywhere in between. And what's interesting is the people at both sides of that bell curve require a lot of support but in very different ways.
Right.
And everybody does. Some people need a lot more care and feeding. Some people like to do their job and go home, and that's perfectly fine too. And everywhere in between.
So in your opinion, can somebody go from one side of the bell curve to the other, or is it more because in our class we talk a lot about like motivation and figuring out people's personality types and what's driving them and what the kind of unconscious meaning behind their performance is. And I'm wondering, as somebody who has done this not in a classroom but has managed obviously many people, do you think that people can move along that bell curve, or is it limited, or what are your thoughts on that?
I do think people can move up and down the curve for a couple reasons. I think it's really challenging to take somebody who is about to be like terminated from the company for performance and get them maxed out on the other side, because I think there's some behavioral things that are happening. It's more behavioral at that point, you know, but within the curve, I've seen a lot of movement in both ways. So, and I think it's role based. So at Raytheon, there's thousands of finance people in a lot of different types of finance jobs. And so you have people who are doing more financial planning and analysis. You have people who are working on the government contracts that we have, managing the budgets. You have people doing proposals and pricing analysis for winning new business. And sometimes people are in the wrong job and they are in a role that's not really aligned with their skill set. And that can be challenging. And so sometimes you put them in a different role and they do a lot better. Sometimes managers can get a little stuck on a person and come in with a bias or develop a bias about a person. And then you hire them into your group and they actually perform pretty well. Yeah. And so you sort of have to make your own assessment, I think, of people. Hiring is a very challenging aspect of my job. It always has been. I find that it's really difficult to unwind a bad hiring decision, but you can't drag your feet. You have to move out and make those tough decisions. Yeah. The worst thing you can do is like leave a role vacant for a really long time because you're looking for the perfect person. And so you have to take a chance on people. So I've hired people who, you know, we're not allowed to hire people who are currently on a performance plan, but I've hired people who are in like the next level up. We call it developing contribution. I've hired people who got that rating in a prior job, mainly because I saw something in that person that made me think they were in the wrong job, and it worked out fine. I've hired people who were really highly rated by someone else, and they didn't end up living up to my expectations. And so part of that is, you know, trying to unwind that and understand what's going on there and why this role is not quite clicking, and working through that with that person.
Cool. Well, I wish I could talk to you even longer, but I don't know how to edit these videos. And if I go over one more minute, I'm going to have to figure it out. But thank you, Carly Fay, for taking some time on your day off to chat with your little brother and with the students of Oklahoma State University. So we really appreciate it. And thank you. I'll be talking to you soon.
Anytime. Okay. Good luck.
Yeah.
Bye.